With the help of some brothers and sisters, this podcast was created to discuss some spiritual topics that you may have questions about. The goal is that you gain a better understanding on the topic, but more importantly, that you grow closer to the Lord. With the help of my little buddy, kick us off.
Stop being pew potato, Hudson.
Welcome to Stop Being a Pew Potato. I am Josh Hudson, and across the way from me is a beautiful lady looking back at me.
You're too sweet.
Haley, my wife. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me in our study upstairs.
It's our studio.
Sorry.
Now everyone knows I don't have a studio. Today's episode is entitled Ways to Love Your Neighbor, which really stems from Mark 12, verses 29 through 31. This passage is pretty difficult, and I want to read it. Starting in verse 29, this is the ESV version. Jesus answered, "The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind, and with all of your strength." Verse 31, this is what I want to key in on. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Notice this doesn't say who our neighbor is. And it really doesn't say that we're allowed to pick which subdivision our neighbor lives in. In other words, we can't pick and choose who to love, but yet in this verse, verse 31 specifically, we are commanded to love your neighbor as yourself. I think the reason that we wanted to start off with this verse before we kind of got started is because there's times where if we're not careful, we can get caught up in trying to grow the church the way we would have it to look, growing it the way we want it. And that's a scary thing.
Yeah, we have to remember that our neighbors aren't just people who look like us and think the same way we do. They're people from different races, different cultures, different ethnicities. It's everybody. It's people that you don't have things in common with. Those people are your neighbors.
So we can't cherry pick Christians from one church to the other, because the reality is we're just moving Christians around. We're not growing the kingdom. So we need to be focusing on loving our neighbors. Like you mentioned, this is more than just Christians. This is non-Christians as well.
Mm-hmm.
So is it wrong for us to focus on bringing other Christians to be members of the local body?
No, I don't think that's wrong.
Absolutely not. I just think the problem is if we're not putting the same kind of attention to those who are hurting, those who are lost, those who,
don't have Jesus,
then we have a problem. There's a lot of reasons why I'm excited to do this podcast today. One of them is because you're with me. The second one is because we actually worked on this outline together. So some of the points that I might not have thought of, you did, and they're better than mine. Today I want to talk about 3 ways with you in which we can show love for our neighbors, so we can love our neighbors as ourselves. And a way to show love towards your neighbor is to learn about your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Well, first, I think we have to go back to like what you said. You don't get to choose what subdivision that your neighbor is from. You have to identify your neighbor as everyone. It's the person in Target who brought back 37 items without a receipt that you're behind. It's the person at Chick-fil-A who gets you in and out quickly. It's the customer service rep that you were spent 45 minutes on the phone with because your bill went up $5.
Also, I'd like to say it doesn't say that we're allowed to love someone in a grumpy manner.
That's true. And it's also the person who still brings their kids out when they're sick to spread it to everyone else. So all of those, they're all your neighbor, and you have to love them the same.
So what are ways that we can do this learning process? What are ways that we can learn about our neighbors?
Have conversations with them. And when you go up to meet them, don't forget their name. Remember stuff about them. Make a point to remember it. If you're somewhere and if you're behind the lady with the 37 items in Target, ask to hold some of her items that she brought back and then start a conversation with her.
Let me ask you this. When we moved to Tennessee, we didn't know anybody.
Well, a few people, but...
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's right. We had some... Fortunately, we did know some people. As far as friends, didn't really have any.
Right.
Your family, about an hour and a half away. Mine's 5.
Mm-hmm.
How did it make you feel when we went and met Alan Yater for the first time? No, let me backtrack. How did it make you feel when you met him the second time?
I feel like a celebrity.
Why did you feel that way?
He knew everything about me. He remembered that where we had moved to, where we had moved from, what I did, our son's name.
And
he even knew our anniversary.
No, he didn't. But the reason that I bring that up is not just to talk about Alan, but that's a trait that we should strive for. That feeling that we already felt like he loved us, right?
Right.
That's what we're talking about when we're saying that you should learn about your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
That's a way.
Mm-hmm.
Learning someone's name, learning a little bit about them, and remembering it. And if you have a bad memory, like
me,
yeah, have some mom brain going on, maybe it's good to just create a new habit, and that's carrying something with you to write somebody's name down.
Yeah.
Instead of forgetting their name 5 seconds after they told you what it was.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens to me every time. Have a full conversation with them, and as I'm walking out the door, I cannot remember their name.
So another way to learn about your neighbor, you said, is talk to them. What are some tips with that?
Ask about them, like where they're from, what they do, and find a common ground with them that you can build on to help build a relationship with them and to really help them open up later, where you can figure out ways to be specific in how you serve your neighbor in that way.
Right. So what I would like to say, this is something that we're trying to work on, is everybody has something going on.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking to somebody, ask a question and to stop talking.
Yeah, listen. Don't be thinking about the next question that you're going to ask them to keep the conversation going. Listen to what they say and then build the conversation on that, which I'm preaching to myself there because I can do that all the time.
And I think the one common denominator around this first point of learning about your neighbors is that you just got to remember that this just takes effort. For some people, this is getting out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to love your neighbor, you got to know who your neighbor is.
Yeah. And to some people, this may seem like a really small deal, but it is the second greatest commandment that Jesus gave us. And you have to start somewhere. So it's better to start small so you can keep going and building on that.
And I think it's interesting that we always, I don't know, it's easy. I said this in a previous podcast when we were talking to Doug and Lisa, but it's easier to love someone that believes the same thing as you do. Matter of fact, when a lot of times when you read things, you're just narrow-minded. You're not listening to what you're reading. Mm-hmm. It says to love your neighbor, and for some reason, you just automatically think about people that you love and how that's easy. You think about your brothers and sisters, but as you pointed out,
you think of the people that are like yourself instead of loving people as yourself. Like when people maybe come into the congregation and they dress differently, look differently, speak differently, or even act differently in worship, you still have to look at them as their neighbor, and you can't go in to talking to them thinking, oh, they're really, really different. You have to go in talking to them thinking, how am I going to find some common ground with this person to help build a relationship with them?
Moving into our second point here is a way to show love. A way to love your neighbor is really to pray about your neighbor.
Absolutely.
So when you think about praying about your neighbor, we kind of transition into this pretty easily because in order to pray about your neighbor, you got to know about them. So this learning process is there. It's real. You know what you're praying about. Is this a generic prayer?
I think in some ways it could be. You could pray for ways of how you could be in a position to start a conversation with someone to lead to other things. And sometimes it can be specific. If you know of a certain situation with someone that you pray specifically for that.
I think something that's actually kind of scary is when you're talking to someone, you're in this learning process, and let's say that they confided you and they talk to you about something and you say, hey, I'll pray for you, or you're going to be in my prayers, but you don't.
Yeah, you forget to, you fail to.
Or you're just giving them lip service.
Yeah.
You got to be very mindful of that.
Mm-hmm. Also with the prayers too, like we need to be praying for God to put us in situations where we can do this.
Amen. Yep.
If He provides that situation, we have to pray that we're going to be strong enough to take advantage of that and to go forward with it.
That's right. Don't pray to God about putting you in a situation and then closing your eyes to a situation when He puts it in front of you.
Right.
this is more or less a question for me, just to get your take on it.
Okay.
Do you tell people, your neighbors we're talking about, do you tell them that you're praying for them?
I think, again, it's very situational. If your neighbor is going through a hard time or they're in a hard situation, then you know they need prayers. I think it's important for them to know that someone is thinking of them. Someone is taking time out of their day to make an effort. But not only tell them that they're praying for them, find out ways you can help them.
I don't think it's wrong to say, to what you just said, I don't think it's wrong to tell them that you're praying for them, but you just don't want to just do it boastfully.
Right. It needs to be very sincere when you do. And it's also not wrong to just not tell them and just to let God do his work.
Right. I don't know of a way to show love towards a neighbor, really any more so than praying for them. That's intimate time with yourself and God. Mm-hmm. And you spent that time praying for a neighbor. Mm-hmm. That's powerful. That's love. Which transitions into our last way to show love, and that's to serve your neighbor. We really want to hit on two different things here, serving the community and then kind of honing in on serving those in your local congregation. But let's talk about serving the community first. What are ways you can even do that? How?
Well, you can donate things that you don't use anymore or things that you've bought. You can donate those. Because sometimes, like being a mom of 2 kids, you don't always have the opportunity to go and volunteer. Because I don't have people to keep my kids during the day. They don't go to school or anything.
And some people probably wouldn't want to keep your kids either.
That's true. So you can figure out other ways. It doesn't just have to be volunteering somewhere, even though that is a big one, because you can build relationships that way. But just make an effort to show you care to someone else that needs help, whether it be donating supplies or money to a cause.
One thing I want to hit on while we're here talking about ways to serve the community is how do we, or maybe I should say, how should we respond to the less fortunate? Because I know how we do. And I'm not just talking about us specifically. I'm talking about everyone that's listening.
Yeah. Well, I think Middle Tennessee, everyone that lives here knows about how the homeless community is just growing and growing. A lot of the corners of the streets, we see people asking for money or needing help. And sometimes people come up to you in stores and we walk away going like, they probably don't need it for that. Like we have a hard heart towards it. We really need to change our mindset on that. And I'm preaching to myself here. I read something recently where someone was with their dad and someone had come up to them and asked for money and said they needed it for medicine or something along those lines. And he gave it to them. And after that person walked away, they said to their dad, oh, they probably just needed it for drugs or alcohol or whatever else. And the dad said, whatever they needed it for or whatever they use that money for, if it's not for what they said, that goes against their character. But if I have the means to help someone and I don't, that says something against mine. Absolutely. And that's pretty powerful. It just kind of hits you in the gut, really.
Yeah, because we've been on the other side of the boat where we're just judging someone instead of serving them when we have the ability to do so, whether it be money or time.
Yeah.
Kind of transitioning from that into serving those in your congregation, what are some things you can do there?
Write cards, which I'm guilty of not doing. The simple stuff that you could really do. And like we said earlier, really get to know your members. And I know this was mentioned in a previous podcast you did, that just make an effort to meet people. Make them feel important, make them feel worthy enough to be there, worthy enough to take part in your time. One thing we have talked about too is really focusing on new members, making them feel a part of the family, where they can show this love later on to other new members.
I think that's a really good point. I don't know if it's just a problem everywhere. We are so excited when there is a new member, when someone gets baptized. We're so excited. And then we almost leave them on an island. We don't give them a life raft. We don't give them a mentor. We don't take time with them individually because we think they got it. So
personally we
right.
don't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we don't, and I know I'm speaking broadly. There's people that do. There's people that we don't see do it, but we haven't. So we're excited that they become a Christian, and then we may fail to serve them in a way that we probably
they
should.
need it, yeah. Because they chose to worship at your or the congregation you're a part of for a reason, and you want to keep it where they still feel a part of that family.
So that's a weak point for us that we're going to start working on, maybe as a couple, but we could just kind of get that today.
A lot of New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, is that let's hone in on the new Christians. Let's make sure that they know, one, that they're loved, they don't forget their purpose, and then, let's face it, they're drinking milk in the very beginning. The only way they're going to get some of that meat is if they grow along the way. Let's help them.
Yeah.
What do you think about elderly widows? I know you mentioned cards, but what are things that you can do to serve them?
You can help them to their car. Like I said earlier, just start small with stuff. Don't overwhelm yourself with things that you think you should be doing. Help them to the car. Hold the umbrella for them. Go get their car if it's raining. Help with meals for the widows or even the elderly too, you know. Sometimes everyday tasks aren't as easy for them as they are for us, even when we have a million things on our plate. Also, I feel like there are a few other groups in the congregations that get looked over, like young married couples. One way you can serve them is just to take them out for a meal or have them in your home for a meal, because a lot of us remember when we were young, married, and broke, and we knew everything with $30 in our bank account. Another group that we could serve is also young families. Parents need time away from their kids too.
You sound like a young mom who has two children.
I'm begging on my knees right now. Someone come and serve.
Did you do this podcast just so you could see if someone could watch your children?
No, we know great people here. Your parents have kept Wyatt a couple of times for a week at a time for us, and my parents have kept him. And there have been a couple of families here that have let us have a night out away from our kids too, which has really been helpful. And that's something that parents get to look forward to too, because you need adult conversation.
Right.
So I think that's one way you can really serve them. And it's really small. Just do it for a couple of hours. You don't have to be with them all night and take them home. And then one group that I really feel like we really look over, and this could be an episode for a later time, so I'm not going to get too in depth to it, is our youth. They're the future of the church, and we have to show them these things. I went through my whole life knowing I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to know this, I need to know that, but I really didn't understand it all until really just recently. I feel like if we really take time with our youth, build relationships with them, take time just to get to know them, that things could be a lot better, and you could have great relationships with them and help guide them and mentor them through this difficult time where they're trying to figure out who they are and where they should go.
Right. And I think that the problem that we're seeing is we're seeing youth leave the church. And if we were to spend time with them and the things you talked about, then maybe that would kind of stop the bleeding in that area.
Yeah, especially in this day and time and culture. Even since I was a teenager, things have changed so much. They just get swamped with things from everywhere. And so they're very open-minded to a lot, which is great, but we also have to reel them back in to God's truth. The only way they're going to accept that is if they get it from someone that they look up to, that they trust. Even though they know their parents are right, they're still not going to want to listen to them. So we have to come in also to serve them and help them to get better and know where to go.
There's things now in my life that I look back and wish I would have known when I was younger.
Yeah, me too.
I wish someone would have took time with me and showed me how important things should be in certain areas of life, or certain habits that I should have created that I didn't create till I was older. So I think you're right. I think there's a group there that we help along the way. And then when they get a little bit older and in their teens, that's when we kind of back off the gas a little bit when they really need it the most.
Yeah, they really do. So submit all your ideas, send in ways you can serve to email it or Facebook or whatever. That way, later on, when the episode is done, we'll have ideas from you guys too to shoot out to everybody else.
That's right. We have some things to look forward to we're going to talk about later on. A couple of guests that already recorded. Bill McIlvain's already recorded. Wes Gossett has recorded. Blake Edwards has recorded. And soon to be Brian Walsh and Alan Yater. And we have about, 10 to 15 guys that are lined up after that. So yeah, we're excited that this is growing to where it's at now. But more importantly, we're excited that there may be someone that's listening that we may be helping. It's so easy to serve. Just the things that we've mentioned, new Christians, it just takes time. It just takes effort. The elderly, the widows. And it would mean so much to them, too. That, I mean, they would feel the love. Just like we joked about how Alan remembered our names, they would feel that 10 times more so if we just took the time with them.
Right.
This is a little bit, almost would seem as a terrible transition, but I want to read a quote by Kathy Lee Gifford. Do you know, like, how she's been on TV forever, our whole lives?
Yeah, she's on the Today Show.
Yeah, I don't, I'm working, so I don't really see her. I just know that she's forever been on TV, but I didn't know till recently that she was religious. This is a quote that I pulled from an interview with her and Megyn Kelly. This happened a long time ago. I'm sure people saw this on social media, and I don't even have the full context of what they were talking about. Just have the quote, and I want to share it. Megyn Kelly was interviewing Kathy Lee, and she asked her about her faith. And her question, Megyn Kelly I'm talking about, question to Kathy Lee was, why are you so bold about your faith? And this is Kathy Lee's response. She answered a question with a question, and she said, you know what? If you had the cure for cancer, would you keep it quiet? Or would you hold it and keep it a secret? And I always say, I have the cure for malignancy of the soul, and he has a name, and his name is Jesus. But regardless of how you feel about her, this quote that I read, this needs to be our response. We need to stop looking at people as people and start looking at people as souls, and that changes everything. Well, Haley, thank you, honey, for coming on the show today.
Sure.
I'm grateful for you.
It was a long trip.
Yeah, we had to go up a flight of stairs. We had to wait for 2 little boys to go to sleep.
Yeah.
But I love you, and I appreciate you.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can help us out by giving us a review and clicking subscribe. Have a great day, and God bless.